Hello everyone, welcome to Leading with Agility, the show that uses the world around us to explore how leadership can be inspired by agility. I'm your regular host Arif, and I'm joined by...
TK, a leadership coach with silly ideas.
Not always silly, sometimes silly, but thank you TK. And we're also joined by another guest today. We have the wonderful Ceri Newton-Sargunar. Thank you very much, Ceri, for joining us. Welcome to our show today. To kick us off, Ceri, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and share a bit about your background, who you are, and let's see where the episode takes us today.
Thanks very much. It's really lovely to be here with you both. I'm definitely here for the silliness, TK. My name's Ceri and I'm an agile behavioural coach. I emphasise the behavioural side of things more than the agile side of things. So agile is my background, but also I have a background in psychology and I'm currently training as a neuroscientist. So I try and lean more heavily into the people side of things. I like working with technical teams, STEM or STEAM, and leadership teams, coaching and working with them on becoming more people-y people.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Ceri. I'm excited to have you with us and especially to explore some of those other areas of your expertise, be they trainee or not, because that's the goal that I want to dig into.
Always extracting value, yes.
Exactly, especially from the perspective of leadership. And I know we've got some interesting things to discuss there. Speaking of leadership, and to kick us off, would you mind maybe sharing a bit about what leadership means to you, given your background and your interests? And let's see what listen to your thoughts on that. I think would be a nice way to start us off.
Sure. So I think leadership is one of those things that's got many different applications in a lot of different contexts. When I'm thinking about it in the work context, so in the teams that I'm working in, I think it's the people who are guiding the direction of the work, the direction of the team, the movement that we all make, the direction that we're all going in. I think, of course, it can be anyone within the team. I think it doesn't have to be necessarily the person who's in charge.
Yeah.
But I think the person who's in charge is someone who wants to strive to be a leader. You're going to have some real problems if the person who's in charge is less of a leader than the people within the team.
It's an interesting situation you can sometimes have, yes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on that point, I think one of the things that you're passionate about, and we'll bring in some of your experiences, and you mentioned you're a trainee neuroscientist. That sounds exciting. We'd love to hopefully get into that in the episode a bit later. But one of the things you're quite passionate about, I believe, is around people from an engineering background, looking to make that step up into that leadership role, as you described it, being in charge, whether it's of people, of teams, of work. What kind of, I suppose, challenges have you come across, and you know, what does day-to-day look like for you in the type of work you're doing in that regard?
Sure. So within the role of agile behavioural coach, I've got quite a few different things that I do. I suppose much like any agile coach, really. So I work directly with teams doing the work themselves. And I think the most common problem that I support teams with in that space, as well as how to get their work done more effectively and make sure that they're using and they're working in the direction that meets the needs of their users or their stakeholders as much as possible, delivering value. I think the challenge that I have in my work is how those individuals, who are frequently brilliant at what they do, technically extremely gifted. The thing that they are perhaps less experienced with is the people side of things. So how to express my idea to someone else in a way that that they can respond to, considering the different points of my idea, rather than feeling the need to respond to it with a rebuttal or to disagree with it completely, but also when people do disagree with my brilliant idea and come up with what they think is a brilliant idea of their own, how to respond to that well, whether it's to have a constructive debate on the best way forwards, or whether it's to pick that apart constructively without leaving either one of us feeling like the other one is I've got a swear word here and I can't use it. So,
well, from time to time you possibly can, but we can imagine you using one. But what I wanted to ask actually is, as you said, Ceri, it's mainly with teams that work in a technical setting, and obviously these leaders that are leading these teams come usually from technology too. So I wanted to hold on that a bit, and because you might have seen we've talked about it, and I've shared. We've done some research, looked at some studies that I wanted to see if they confirm a common, I wouldn't want to call it a stereotype, but people coming from technology have a certain way of thinking, right? The studies that we will link in podcast notes, essentially, MBTI is not a tool that I find great, but it points to something, right? And it says that there's a lot of introversion, which is a psychological term, and people that are in these roles gravitate more towards introversion, towards this way of thinking, towards sensing. And I'm just wondering, from your point of view, in your experience, and also like your new education and the way you're looking at things, do you find that? Would you confirm that? Is that something that you see a clear bias towards?
So I think in teams, in technical teams, yes, certainly. I think in technical leadership, much less so.
Okay.
I've seen that it's the more extroverted leaders that tend to be able to get themselves into those roles. So a lot of the success of promotion comes from being able to network effectively, not just knowing your stuff, but also getting people to see that you know your stuff and getting in front of the right people. So I think from a leadership perspective, I've seen far more extroversion. And I think you called on the MBTI there. I prefer to use something like the Big Five personality, which is also known as Ocean or Prism. I can't offhand remember what Prism stands for, but Ocean is openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And so people do tend to fall, on that extroversion, introversion scale, one end or another. And I tend to see that people who are keen on getting the work done tend to be more on that introverted end of the spectrum, whereas people who tend to progress to leadership roles fall more into the extroversion. Either that or they're introverted with perhaps neurodiverse tendencies that mean that they are very clear and able to explain their points technically very well in a way that appeals to leadership.
So that's very interesting, actually, because it would seem like, if as we're talking about leaders coming from a technical background, it would seem like the people of this technical background that get promoted or seek leadership and then get promoted to positions of leadership are able to reach to their extroverted side, or as you say, there's some neurodiversity that helps them. That's possibly a superpower, isn't it? Being able to be on one from this background that, you can definitely talk the lingo, but on the other hand, have these skills that allow you, as you say, to present effectively and have the people skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So being able to connect with other people is definitely a superpower when it comes to being able to progress with your career. And I think it's a really valuable thing to have, especially in the technical space. I wouldn't say it's the only way that people get into positions of leadership, though. In fact, quite a lot of the people that I have worked with, I'm not saying that this is everybody, because of course I get called in for the work that I do. So a lot of the people that I work with come from a very capable technical background and are able to get their point across, whether that's in a relational, respectful way, or whether they're very logical, very clear on the facts, and able to get a team to rally around them because of that. But they get promoted into those positions of leadership because they're very good at what they do. And so you see a lot of what we sometimes refer to as rock stars. And I know that that's a term that gets used in agile circles in the software space, but it applies just as much in across all of the engineering spaces. So whether that's software engineering, mechanical engineering, optical engineering, it doesn't matter. The people that get those positions of leadership are often very technically capable, and are often actually, maybe they're good at persuading the people around them that they're the best person for the role, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the best leaders of people. And in fact, they don't necessarily come with those people management skills as a part of that, because that hasn't been what has gotten them into that leadership position to begin with.
I think on that point, Ceri, I think that I'd like to pick up on that. I think we get your thoughts on, as you said, that people aspect hasn't been part of their forte or their repertoire as such, and now they're thrust into this position where it's quite an important part of or it will become quite important part of their role.
Yeah.
How have you observed that challenge for those individuals appearing? As in, how do they cross that? And is there a challenge of self-awareness? As in, okay, now I actually need to think more about how I am, how I'm leading, or how I'm showing up, because there's an impact to that. Or is it something where that it's just a training gap, and they just need the help to be able to know how to, quote unquote, line manage people? Does it cross all of that? What are your observations? What have you kind of seen, and in terms of how that comes across?
Yeah, I've seen some really good line manager training that does help people lean into those people leadership skills, but I've also seen some really ineffective leadership training that has not it hasn't taught people who need those skills what they need to know, because I think in those instances a lot of it is assumed. It's assumed that they already know how to give feedback well, for example. Or how to, they know how to motivate someone. And I think, especially someone who's disengaged or underperforming. And I think these are things that we all struggle with. And so the best leadership programs I've seen are the ones that develop that. The thing that you've called out there that I see missing most often is that one of self-awareness. And self-awareness in this space is absolutely crucial. So the best leaders are the ones who are more self-aware. But the bad news in this space is that all of us are unfortunately really poor when it comes to self-awareness. We may think that we show up in one way. The people around us may well experience us in a completely different way. We're often quite mistaken on what we think our strengths are compared to what everybody else thinks our strengths are. And we are quite often, even more often, mistaken when it comes to our flaws. We are much more generous to ourselves, I think, in a lot of the flaws, or we just don't see them. So thinking about Johari's window, where we're very firmly in that, things that I know, that things that other people know that I don't know. So self-awareness is definitely a struggle, particularly in leaders in this technical space. Being aware of the impact that I'm having, being aware of how my words are landing with people, but also being conscious of, in fact, I think the biggest challenge that I see for leaders in this space is being aware of the weight that my words carry when I am promoted into that leadership position. So previously my words carried weight because I thought that they were important. I was making points and I'm quite right because I'm technically gifted. But when you then add a chief engineering title. When you add a CTO title or a director of title onto that, it can be really difficult to remember that those words, whatever I say, and in any forum that I say it, those words carry extra weight and extra gravitas, and there's an element of threat to the people around me for disagreeing or not going along with what I say. Whether I want to be that leader or not, that's something beyond my control because I'm in that position of power.
I think this is fascinating about words, what you've touched on there, and it's something I don't think many people consciously realize in terms of the impact of, and what I was wondering about when you were describing that, when it comes to words, is it's funny because if you're talking about obviously engineers who are moving up that career ladder and they're getting into these positions, quite rightly, of course, being recognized for what they're amazing at. In most cases, presumably they're managing other engineers who are probably a bit further down in their career, maybe a bit more junior or mid-level, etc. So I'm curious about how does that dynamic work when, as you said, being mindful of words and impact it's creating. Do you think that it's different when it comes to engineering teams or engineering type teams that these people are managing, or is it the same across the board? Do you see any differences in there? I'm just curious if there's something you've observed there.
Differences in terms of
the impact, I suppose, isn't it? So, like you've described that there is impact of how the importance of I was valued for my knowledge and understanding of topic X and my engineering excellence in it, and so. But now I have to lead a team of people. They so happen to be other engineers too. Is there some assumption that actually it doesn't really matter because they all know me anyway? We've all been doing the same work, so I can just carry on how I've been doing. But then it's like actually no, I have to change up how I'm doing things now because there is going to be an impact. That's what I'm curious about. Is it different from a engineering context in that regard, or does it change? And if so, what is the change, kind of thing?
So I think
question.
The biggest change that I've seen is having to let go.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So when I'm no longer a boots on the ground engineer, when I'm the person setting the strategy, the direction, the goals for the team, that needs to be my focus as an engineering or a technical leader. It's really difficult for people who love doing this work to not want to get their hands dirty and to take a step back from doing the work. And this is the point at which I think a lot of technical leaders get accused of micromanaging. I don't think the micromanaging, again, it comes back to that intent versus impact. They're not intending to micromanage. It's just really hard to let go of something that you've cared about so deeply for so long. But unfortunately, it is a necessary part of the role. And so some of the work that I've done is helping leaders to step away from that side of things and move towards the strategic direction setting, goal setting side of things, and help them to understand how those goals are landing, whether they're clear, how to change their language and the way that they're speaking about those goals so that they're clear to everybody, not just clear to the people in the technical team. Because as a leader, you're not just leading a team, you're also, in a way, responsible for the reputation of that team, which means that a large part of your job is sales when it comes to what the team is doing and how people see it outside of that team. So translating those technical goals into something that say your business development or project management team or finance team can also understand, or something that HR can get to grips with what you're doing. And so that can be another challenge, I think, as you move into that leadership space.
And it's intriguing, actually. You've said that there's a different way of communicating goals, but our listeners, especially the ones that have not been exposed to engineering teams and so on, might not know. Would you be able to give us an example of how a technical person can give goals unskillfully? What would it look like so people know?
Sure. So I think the technical goals, it can be really easy. And I don't come from a technical background, so I can't, unfortunately, share an example of the technical language that someone might use.
Yeah, but it's overall.
But so what I've seen is, the goal will be expressed in a way that is meaningful to everybody within that engineering team. So then using something like an OKR process can be a really useful way of helping to translate that into something that's understandable outside of the team, simply because of the inclusion of the metrics, the measures. So now that we can see what those measures of success will look like, it's easier for people outside of that team to understand what it is that they might see. Helping them have that conversation as well, testing those metrics, testing the wording with people from outside of the team. I think it's very difficult to get it right first time round. I think something like OKRs needs to be quite fluid if you're in a position to use them, and they're not right for every context and every setting. But if they are something that you use, it's not just one and done. It should be an ongoing conversation until it's something that works for both sides.
I suppose an observation. I suppose. I mean, we not so long ago had a chat with Will, a friend of ours who's a very experienced technical engineering leader and innovator. And something that came to mind for me in the conversation we were having was, what drives his passion about innovation is about fixing problems. And it's like, I want to create something that solves a problem that someone has. And I can appreciate that when you're in that mindset, what the driver is solving the problem, and maybe it can be easy to miss, what value does it create, and how should the problem be solved, and how do we know it's been successful, etc., etc. That maybe. I don't know if you agree, Ceri, but it's possible that focus can then mean that we miss the value aspect, the measurement aspect. I don't know if you agree or disagree on that.
Yeah, so I think this is certainly something that I've come up against with my technical people. So they're very good at also describing the solution that they want to put in place to solve the problem, which it doesn't necessarily.
It's not bad, is it?
It's not a bad thing, but I think the thing that's hard to get across is that this is one of many options that we might want to take forward.
Exactly.
And some of the work that we have to do is what is the outcome? What is the ideal state that people experiencing this problem want to be in? And then the steps to get there. That's then the work of the team.
And I think there's a side point there around leadership responsibility in how to help that team get to the right place as well. So that's another interesting one maybe to explore. We've been talking at length now about leaders moving into this role and challenges and awareness and that they need to have and bring into this leadership position. It's been fascinating discussing all that with you. I want to move on to talking about how we can help them. And I know you have some cool ideas on that. And I mentioned the neuroscience aspect, so we need to talk about that too. But before we do all of that, let's go for a break and then reconvene in a moment. Thank you very much. Our next webinar will be coming your way on November the 19th, live on LinkedIn. We'll be joined by Chris O'Sullivan, a leader with over 20 years of experience in workplace well-being, to discuss how leaders can better protect their mental health. He'll share practical strategies to help leaders build resilience and thrive under pressure. To register, visit our website, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, and hit that sign up button. See you there. Welcome back, everyone. And as I was saying before the break, we were talking at length about people moving into, or engineering folks moving into leadership positions, and some of the associated challenges and so on that Ceri has been working with and observing throughout her career so far. Moving forward from that and thinking about how we help folks in those situations, let's start there. And I know you're obviously a trained coach, Ceri, as well, like us. But it'd be interesting to explore how you see coaching as a medium of support, and where does it, where can it be more effective or most effective when you're working with individuals like this?
So what I have seen really valuable then is holding that reflective space for senior technical leaders. So I work with technical leadership teams in technical organizations and engineering organizations in the UK and internationally. And I would say that the questions that I ask, whilst obviously specific to the context, there are certain points that I do keep coming back to in this space. The one around impact versus intent is really important. That's one that we come back to, seem to come back to again and again. So regardless of what it was that I intended and how I intended to show up, given what I saw, what I heard, and what I experienced as a result, what is the likely impact that I had in that space? And that's where becoming aware of the hierarchy, the way that my words have weight in those spaces, can be really important. Another question that generates quite a lot of insight and awareness is the one about what it is that you actually want out of the circumstance or out of the situation.
Oh, an important one, yeah.
Yeah, so when we are... particularly when we need to have challenging conversations, particularly when someone disagrees with us, when we have to have a feedback conversation, or perhaps when someone has given one of us as technical leaders some feedback, it can be really easy to have a very emotional reaction. And I know that a lot of my technical leaders like to see themselves as logical and linear and focusing on the facts. Neuroscience tells us that every single response that we have is emotional, whether we acknowledge it or not. And more often than not, the less we acknowledge it, the less able we are to keep it in check and control it. So by focusing on what it is that we really want out of a situation, and it is a question that I will ask exactly like that, if what you actually want from the situation is to punch the other person in the face and see them fall over and laugh about it, then there's very limited work that we can do. But most engineers actually that I've worked with don't want that. They might feel like that sometimes, but actually mostly people want to have good working relationships. They want to progress the work. They want to progress towards their goals. And so the next question is, if that's what you really want, what is it that you have to do? Where do you have to bend? Where do you have to act a little differently? How do you need to modify your language or how you're showing up? How do you have to become more self-aware of your reaction in the moment? And what do those reactions look like? So a lot of the work that we then go on to do once we've had that conversation is looking at their reactions, the ways that they have an emotional response to how someone else is showing up, without any say so. Do your ears go hot? Do you get tight in the chest? Do you, feel overwhelmed with rage? And helping them to become more aware of that so that then they can choose and become more intentional about how they respond in order to get them towards what it is that they actually want from the conversation.
All right.
I've seen that be very effective.
But in that case, I'm wondering about one thing, because, obviously I want to also contrast my experience with yours and yours with mine. And many of our listeners are people that, also are in the business of helping leaders, or, they're people, so HR, and they would like to know, what is it that when there's a coach available, what is it that technical people ask for? So what I'm asking is this, right? And you've mentioned coaching definitions. I personally believe quite strongly that every coaching starts with the client coming to a coach and asking for something. And it's, they all ask for different things in different ways. And I was wondering, from your point of view, of the problems that you've mentioned, what is it that people, technical leaders, when they come to you, what is it they ask for in terms of you helping them as a coach? What's that their asks?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of the time, the first thing that they'll want some support with is with something more practical, like prioritizing. So perhaps they've got a workload that they are completely overwhelmed by. They feel like they're drowning. They're struggling to keep up, especially if they're new into their role, and they're being asked to take on responsibilities that are outside of their comfort zone and beyond what they're used to taking on. Sometimes they come to me wanting to talk about experiencing imposter phenomenon. So that has come up. I wouldn't say that's dominant in any way. I would say that sort of the first opener to the conversation is that around priorities. The next thing that I would say is much more common across the board is being able to deal with difficult people, or who they see as difficult people in their teams. And what this commonly means is people who don't agree with what I think, and not knowing how to take that conversation forwards, and feeling threatened by there's a conflict that they believe is going to arise as a result. And this is the case both for not just for engineering leaders, but for project management leaders in the technical space, for HR leaders in the technical space, even for sales and development leaders in the technical space. So I would say it's not just a technical space problem; it is a leadership problem.
No, I would definitely agree. But the thing is, I think, which is, I think, quite important for our listeners too, is now, as you said, people are coming to you with, for instance, starting with prioritization. Has nothing to do really with, all these wonderful things that we can help them with. And when you spoke about intent and the actual effect of it. But the question is, right, because I believe that when they're coming in with that, or maybe talking about these difficult conversations, as you've explained, they're actually maybe silently or a bit on the side asking for help. And I'm wondering, if we were to give advice to leaders of leaders when they're having their one-to-ones, what is it that they should be vigilant for? What is it that they should, listen for when it comes to what their leaders, for instance, of a technical background, but others too, are saying, so they know that maybe it's a good idea to, recommend talking to a coach?
Sure. So there's a quote by Virginia Satir, which is, "The problem is never the problem," which I think is one of the reasons that people come to me wanting to talk about priorities. And because I'm someone who listens to people when they're describing their overwhelm, that's often the safest place for them to start the conversation, particularly if the questions that I'm going to ask them aren't questions that they're used to people asking them, and the conversations that people aren't used to, the conversations that they're not used to having with people. And so the things that then catch my attention are them talking about struggles with, and this is another thing that actually people come to me with quite often, is struggles with their peers. So they'll say things like, "I don't know what to do about," and then they'll name
a person.
I don't know what to do about. I'm having a bit of a challenge, or if they don't name that person, which a lot of the time again they don't. A lot of engineers, leaders, are very good at sort of trying to protect the anonymity of their team members. But there's someone in my team that I'm having a bit of a struggle with. There's someone in my team that I don't quite know what to do with. Could you help me with that? And we can have that conversation quite effectively without me knowing who it is. Who it is doesn't really matter. It's more, how is that impacting you? How's that affecting you? And so then things that also might catch my awareness or trigger my attention are them talking about responses that they've had. So that was a really difficult meeting, or I had a terrible meeting with so and so, or this meeting was really hard. And so then I'll ask the question, what about it was difficult?
Yeah,
what made it such a challenge, and how's that impacting you here in this conversation today?
I just wanted to pick up on, so this is great, and it's lovely to see how you're creating amazing impact for these individuals in raising their self-awareness and increasing their consciousness about how their behavior is impacting and so on. what, how are they judging for themselves, do you think, their own improvement in some of these areas? What are the signs are you looking for, or are they looking for? And what gives you the satisfaction or motivation that you're creating the right impact for them, I suppose, as well? Maybe that's a trickier one to answer, but
Sure.
have a go.
So I use Menti polls most often with my clients. If they've got an internal measurement tool, then I'll use that. So at the start of our coaching agreement, we'll talk about the different things that it is that they want to be better. So it might be more confident. It might be I want to be better at having difficult conversations. It might be that I want things to feel less like they are constantly on fire. It might be I want to be able to relinquish control, or it might be that I want to feel like I'm in more control. I think the thing that I help people with most often, and one that I always ask about, is their sense of calm. So I think the thing that becomes apparent over the course of our work together is that you can't change the level of chaos, whatever that looks like in your organization. You can't change that without a huge amount of input from a large number of your leadership team, without some very intentional conversations. So given that a lot of this that's going on in the environment is beyond our control, how are you as a leader responding to that? So from a neuroscientific perspective, the more stressed I am feeling in my day-to-day work, the less well I will respond to criticism. So I'll take criticisms more personally, even if they weren't intended personally. I'm more likely to reply with ad hominem attacks, so attacking the person rather than pulling apart the idea. And that's a defensive mechanism. So I feel under threat. So how under threat do you feel is another measure of success. I'm also, as a leader, so stress shuts down and damages, in fact, prolonged stress damages the areas of your brain that are related to or connected with decision making, with finding solutions, with problem solving, and also with emotional regulation. So it's really important that we do this work together to help them feel more calm in the workplace. Even if we can't change the workload, if we can change how they respond to the workload, even if we can't change how much conflict there is, if we change how we respond to that conflict, and even if we can't change the chaos, if we can change how calm I feel in the face of that chaos, like how much I can accept or lean into any of those things.
There's a lot here about taking control and ownership of oneself, right? That there's a strong theme there, which is really vital, as you described. On the point of neuroscience, and we haven't touched on it, so I think let's at least give a few minutes on that. Based on the trainee work you're doing, I mean, what is it that's exciting, new, and maybe you'd like to share with our listeners that you're discovering that might affect all these conversations or thoughts about leadership more generally, or when it comes to technical folks like we've been talking about today, moving into leadership positions? What's new and exciting that you'd like to share, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So what I've been looking at most recently is adult hippocampal neurogenesis.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So that's the idea that you can create new neurons in your brain, so your brain can grow, essentially. And what's been shown through some fascinating work, what they've done is shown that the areas of your brain that are able to grow new neurons are predominantly in the hippocampus. So that's the area of your brain that is largely responsible for memory formation. So what this means is that whereas before it was thought that once you're an adult, that's it, your brain stops growing and you are who you are forever. What adult hippocampal neurogenesis shows is that the area of your brain that's responsible for remembering and recall and memory formation can grow, can adapt, and can change. And so because a large part of our emotional response is generated from the combination of our amygdala and our hippocampus, it means that actually we can continue learning, we can continue growing, and we can change behaviors right up until death. So the phrase "you can't teach an old dog new tricks"
not
basically
true.
is not true. Yes,
it hasn't aged well. Yes,
you can teach a dog of any age new tricks.
You've heard that here first, folks. That is a myth. Ceri has broken the myth of old dog and new tricks. There you go. Yeah. Sorry.
But it's a recent development and a recent learning from what I hear. And, I think it's a great one, to be honest. It also helps with the research of Alzheimer's disease. Which,
Yeah.
So with that, I suppose with that knowledge, armed with that knowledge, how are you putting that to use in your work? I mean, is there anything you're doing differently? Is it affecting how you have conversations, or is it just subtle changes in your coaching work, for instance?
Yeah, I mean, so personally, it means that I, especially when you're referring to Alzheimer's there, it means that I'm aware that the more I keep trying to learn new things, the better my long-term brain health would be. And that's something that I also try and encourage leaders that I work with to do. So even something like picking up a new language, or for me, doing my neuroscience masters, it means that I'm keeping my brain healthy and functioning for longer. In terms of the leaders that I work with, it means that I'm constantly trying to help them see the world in new ways, because I know that they can, and showing them that they can gets better results. So helping them to become more aware of their reactions then teaches them and reinforms their amygdala on how they can react. And one thing that I really love teaching leaders around is something that we call the shove. So helping them to see that the way that we respond to things doesn't have to be the way that we always respond to things. We can learn to do that differently. I think that'd be very effective.
Fascinating. Really fast. Thank you for sharing that, Ceri. That's a really insightful knowledge there. As we move to the end of the episode, I wanted to, I think, explore a bit more of a systemic view, just to get your thoughts on it. And I guess, I don't know, TK, you want to add something, you can, because you're always interested in this. But, we've talked at length about how you're working with leaders, whether it's in a coaching setting or otherwise, and helping them out with, the situation and challenges you find them in. What is the responsibility, do you think, of more senior leaders from an organizational point of view in either creating environments or culture that can benefit leaders that you're working with better? So how can they be supported more from a systemic point of view or organizational point of view? And are there particular things that you'd like to see more of, maybe, or less of? Curious to see what you think about that.
Absolutely. So I've seen coaching schemes used really well. I've seen peer coaching schemes be used quite well as well,
nice.
Where people in those schemes are coaching people that they don't come into contact with day to day. I think that's absolutely crucial to be able to not have any hierarchy influence the conversations. From a wider organizational perspective, certainly it can be a very hard sell to people in a finance department who are looking at the numbers on a screen. However, what I have seen is coaching reducing absence through stress, and coaching reducing attrition. So again, I take measures of these things in terms of whether people are looking for a new job, whether people are serious about looking for a new job, and how calm or how stressed, how well they feel able to cope with their day-to-day. So in terms of how coaching might impact the bottom line, I think that's one of those crucial conversations that helps to drive that work forwards. And as well as that, helping more senior leadership understand the impact of things like trust, or the impact of the shove that I've spoken about before, and using these real world examples that they can relate to. So always using metaphors that they can connect with, helps them to feel more feel the value and recognize the value of the work, which then opens up the conversation. I think helping more senior leaders become more self-aware helps to show them the value of work like this.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be through external coaches like me, but I think if you are seeing a lot of attrition or a lot of stress, then certainly coaching can be hugely impactful.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah. It's a warning flag, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's definitely something that organizations need to keep an eye on.
I think so.
Yeah,
that's
definitely
true. Although I would say that, what I found interesting, and, maybe it's a hot, controversial take, that over time, and Arif, you might agree with me, we stopped convincing clients that coaching is something they need or want, right? We tend to work with clients that, feel like this approach is something that would fit, because, streaming, making sure you add value and then streaming opposite to the current might be so much to ask, and it's so much to ask from a coach. So I'm just wondering, do you find people actually coming and asking you to be the coach for these wonderful teams as a coach, or are they asking for something else?
Yes. So because I'm very clear that I do focus on the behavioural side of things, I make sure that that's what I speak about more than the agile side of things. I think other brilliant agile coaches have that very definitely covered. And so, yes, I do get approached for this more people side of things. So how do I help my team work together? How do I help them understand the impact that they're having? And a lot of the time, I get asked to come and support an organisation when they have had something like an agile transformation be rolled out, and it's helping them in terms of the workload, but they're not seeing the results in terms of how people are working together. So there's still problems with the delivery. There's still siloed teams. People still aren't matched up. There's still conflict. There's still tension. There's still attrition. So people are still leaving, jumping ship, whatever that might look like. There's still people going off with stress. So even though they've put these measures in place, agile it can't fix everything.
No.
It certainly help to hold a mirror up and help us move in a better direction. But I tend to get called in when that's not working yet.
Aside from, and that's great to hear, and aside from all the, as you said, the agile stuff, going back to the people side, and Tia mentioned earlier, our listeners, some of them might be working in HR or L&D type positions, for example. If they're listening to this episode and they're listening to your experiences working with these type of managers or leaders, as some final thoughts to leave them with, what would be, I suppose, one or two things? Maybe coaching's going to come back here in your answer. That's fine. One or two things you think they can be doing to help their career growth of technical folks moving into these leadership positions. What would you demand of them as some kind of final thoughts?
Sure. Of course, I'm going to say that coaching can be hugely impactful. Yep. I don't think it's the only thing.
No.
I think some sort of self-awareness training. So whether you're someone who brings in Myers-Briggs or there's SDI, there's DISC, there's all sorts of different or HBDI. There's so many different tools that you can use to help teams become more self-aware. But I think that's a great place to start the conversation, to help people to see why some of the problems that they might be having might be connected to the human skills rather than the hard skills. And I think that can open up the conversation really well. Also tying it back to how stressed people are feeling. Because when you talk to people in that leadership space, more often than not, the stress that they're feeling is because of pressures from above, people not understanding what it is that they're doing from above, but also pressures from below. So people not understanding the pressures that they're under as leaders. And assuming that when they're not getting things done, it's malicious and not just because they're phenomenally busy, not understanding the stress and the weight that they carry as leaders. So that self-awareness can be really, really helpful.
Amazing. Thank you, Ceri. Thanks so much. And thank you for joining us on this episode today. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear all your experiences and your expertise in this field. I hope our listeners have equally enjoyed it. So we'll end the episode there, and all we can say is we hope all of you listening will join us for our next episode soon. And if you haven't already, please do like or subscribe and leave a review if you're enjoying what we're doing here. It's always appreciated, and it helps with the algorithm. So from all of us, Ceri, myself, and TK, thank you very much. And we'll see you soon on our next episode.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, both.